He was well. There was nothing wrong. How could a healthy man die?
It was a hot July day in 1973 when Bruce Lee, martial arts legend and global icon,
I think it is just marvelous that the Asian Awards has chosen to honor Bruce.
lay motionless in a quiet Hong Kong apartment. Not in a hospital, not in a film studio, but in the private residence of actress Betty Ting Pei. The world was told it was an allergic reaction. Others whispered of poison, betrayal, even murder. Decades passed and the mystery deepened.
Coroner's report that your father died with a violent reaction to aspirin?
Yes,
But now, Betty Ting Pei has stepped forward with revelations that shake the foundations of the official story. What really happened that day? And why has the truth remained buried until now?
Chinese boxer.
The day Bruce Lee died. On July 20th, 1973, Bruce Lee's day began with promise. He was finalizing a multi-film deal with Warner Brothers and brainstorming ideas for an animated series with Hanna-Barbera. The legendary martial artist had just wrapped up a morning meeting at Golden Harvest Studios to discuss final scenes for Game of Death. But instead of heading home or back to business, he took a detour to Betty Ting Pei's apartment at 67 Beacon Hill Road. The decision, casual on the surface, would prove fateful. At some point that afternoon, Bruce complained of a headache. Betty, accustomed to treating her own migraines, offered him a tablet of Equagesic, a strong aspirin-based painkiller. After taking the pill, Bruce decided to lie down and rest. Betty returned to watching television, unaware of the storm about to break. Within 30 minutes, something was wrong. Bruce wouldn't wake up. Betty, panicked, called producer Raymond Chow. When he arrived and found Bruce unresponsive, he debated what to do. Rumors say he adjusted Lee's clothing before finally calling for medical help, desperately trying to manage the optics before the truth spilled out. Bruce Lee was declared dead at Queen Elizabeth Hospital at 6:15 p.m., but it didn't add up. Chow told the press Bruce had died at home with his wife, Linda. That story unraveled in days. The truth that he had died in Betty's apartment sparked a media frenzy and worldwide speculation. From that moment forward, Bruce Lee's death stopped being just a tragedy. It became a mystery. Who was Betty Ting Pei? Before her name became forever linked to Bruce Lee's final hours, Betty Ting Pei was a rising star in Asian cinema. Born on February 19, 1947, in Taipei, Taiwan, she came from a respected family with roots in Beijing. Her uncle was a general in China's National Revolutionary Army, and her grandfather had served as a police chief during the warlord era. But Betty chose a different path, one lit by cameras and flashing lights. In 1963, she launched her acting career with Taiwan's Central Motion Picture Corporation. Just 4 years later, she caught the eye of a Shaw Brothers director and made her Hong Kong debut in The Purple Shell. Adopting the screen name Betty Ting Pei, she quickly became known for her daring roles, often cast as mistresses or provocative characters in dramas and steamy romances. Throughout the 60s and 70s, she appeared in over 50 films, working across multiple genres, from musicals to martial arts. She became a frequent collaborator with director Inoue Umetsugu and starred in fan favorites like The Yellow Muffler and The Millionaire Chase. Her fame peaked just as she met Bruce Lee in 1972. That encounter would define the next chapter of her life, not on screen, but in headlines, investigations, and endless controversy. Bruce Lee, a life in motion. Bruce Lee wasn't just a martial artist. He was a revolutionary, a man who reshaped action cinema and broke barriers for Asian actors in Hollywood. Born on November 27, 1940 in San Francisco, he entered the world during his father's opera tour. Just months later, the family returned to Hong Kong, where Bruce's journey into performance began. By age 3 months, he was already on film, serving as a baby stand-in in Golden Gate Girl. As he grew, Bruce became a child actor, appearing in nearly 20 films before his teenage years. But while fame followed him, so did trouble. Bullied for his mixed heritage and drawn into street fights, Bruce's adolescence was chaotic. That changed in 1953 when he began studying Wing Chun under Master Ip Man. Martial arts gave him focus and a future.
You want to fight? I'll take you on.
In the late 50s, Bruce returned to the U.S., eventually settling in Seattle. He taught Kung Fu and even worked as a cha-cha dance instructor. Then Hollywood came knocking. His breakout came as Kato in The Green Hornet, 1966-67, where his electrifying moves captivated American audiences. But roles were limited, often stereotypical. Frustrated, Bruce went back to Hong Kong in 1971, seeking creative control. It paid off. The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon made him a legend. He was more than just a fighter. He was a philosopher, poet, husband, and father. Married to Linda Emery, he had 2 children, Brandon and Shannon. His legacy would echo not just in cinema, but in the martial arts world forever. Yet for all his achievements, his sudden death at 32 left behind more questions than answers. Betty and Bruce, a complicated relationship. When Betty Ting Pei met Bruce Lee, she was 25, already an established actress. Their first encounter took place at the now-demolished Hyatt Regency Hotel in Hong Kong. To Betty, Bruce was unlike any man she had ever met. Intense, thoughtful, philosophical. "He was the first man I truly respected," she would later confess. "Before him, I wasn't serious about relationships." Their connection, though discreet, grew deeper over time. Betty later admitted that she and Bruce were romantically involved for over a year before his death, while she maintained for decades that they were just friends. In 2013, she confirmed their intimate relationship. It was emotional, it was real, but it was also complicated. Bruce was married. He had a family. Publicly, he was a devoted husband and father. Privately, his bond with Betty suggested a man caught between 2 worlds. Those closest to him noticed his visits to her apartment. They were more than friends, but how far it went and how it affected him remains debated. On the day he died, Bruce was in Betty's apartment, resting, vulnerable, and alone with her. That single fact ignited a storm. Was it love, lust, or just timing? Betty insists it was none of the above. "It was heaven's will," she said. "No one wanted this to happen." Their relationship has remained a topic of fascination, largely because it blurs the lines between personal affection and public scandal. For Betty, it became the defining shadow of her life. For Bruce, it became a posthumous mystery the world still hasn't solved. Now first, like always, be sure to hit the like button down below. It helps us out tremendously with the reach of this video. Thank you. Conspiracies and cover-ups. Bruce Lee's sudden death sent shockwaves around the globe. But what came after was even more bewildering. Almost immediately, the truth was bent, buried, and rearranged. Raymond Chow, Bruce's friend and business partner, initially told the press that Lee had died at home with his wife Linda. It was a lie, a calculated one. In reality, Bruce had died in Betty Ting Pei's apartment. Why the cover-up? Some say it was to protect Bruce's reputation. Others believe it was to protect Betty from public wrath. Either way, the damage was done. Once the truth emerged just days later, speculation exploded. Tabloids ran wild with sensational headlines. One even declared, "Fragrant chamber killed the dragon." Rumors of foul play gained traction. Was Betty responsible? Did she poison him? Was there a jealous lover involved? Whispers pointed fingers in every direction, from Chinese triads to Japanese assassins to rival studios fearing Bruce's rising dominance. The panic spread beyond Hong Kong. In Kuala Lumpur, students protested in the streets, waving signs accusing Betty of murder. In Hong Kong itself, she received multiple death threats. The tension escalated so rapidly that at one point, a suspicious package labeled "Betty Ting knows the cause of Bruce Lee's death" sparked a bomb scare. It didn't stop there. The colonial government, unaccustomed to dealing with such hysteria, launched a formal investigation, but even they couldn't offer clarity. Every theory, drug overdose, allergic reaction, sexual exhaustion, and poisoning was considered, then discarded. And throughout it all, Betty Ting Pei was trapped, vilified by some, pitied by others. Whatever the truth, her life was forever altered. The effort to protect Bruce's legacy may have shielded his family from scandal, but it came at a heavy price, fueling a firestorm of conspiracies that still rage today. The medical puzzle. While rumors swirled, doctors searched for something solid, an explanation grounded in science. The official cause of death was listed as cerebral edema or brain swelling, but that diagnosis only raised more questions than it answered. What caused it? And why did it strike someone as fit as Bruce Lee? Some pointed to Equagesic, the aspirin-based painkiller Betty Ting Pei gave him.
He then says he has a headache, so Betty goes to find him a painkiller.
Could an allergic reaction have triggered fatal swelling? It was possible, but Bruce had taken aspirin before without incident. No clear signs of anaphylaxis, the usual reaction in allergy deaths, were found in the autopsy. Others looked at Bruce's intense physical regimen. He had recently undergone surgery to remove sweat glands from his armpits, aiming to stay dry and camera-ready during shoots. That decision may have made it harder for his body to regulate heat, especially on a scorching July day in Hong Kong. One theory that gained traction over time was heat stroke. Matthew Polly, author of Bruce Lee: A Life, believes it was the most plausible cause. Bruce had previously collapsed from heat exhaustion just months before. The day he died, he'd been rehearsing, energized, and exerting himself before complaining of a headache. In 2022, Spanish researchers offered another theory: hyponatremia, a condition caused by low sodium levels from excessive water intake, possibly worsened by marijuana use and diet habits. This could have led to swelling in the brain and other organs matching autopsy findings. In short, there was no smoking gun, just a tangle of symptoms, possibilities, and educated guesses. And with every passing year, the lack of certainty only deepens the mystery. The fallout for Betty Ting Pei. In the aftermath of Bruce Lee's death, Betty Ting Pei's life spiraled into chaos. Once a rising star of Asian cinema, she found herself engulfed by suspicion, hostility, and relentless media attention. Fans of Bruce Lee, devastated and desperate for answers, looked for someone to blame. Many chose Betty. She received threatening letters. Strangers shouted accusations in public. The pressure became unbearable. At just 26, she was labeled everything from a homewrecker to a murderer. The bright lights of the film industry turned cold, casting shadows instead of glory. Roles dried up. Directors hesitated. Her once promising career began to wither. The emotional toll was profound. Betty struggled with anxiety, isolation, and eventually developed schizophrenia. To escape the noise, she turned inward, leaving behind the world of cinema for a life of spiritual retreat. She embraced Buddhism, adopted a vegetarian lifestyle, and began volunteering at temples across Hong Kong. In 1976, she married businessman Charles Huang and had a daughter, Candy. But even that chapter ended in divorce just 4 years later. For Betty Ting Pei, the tragedy of Bruce Lee's death wasn't just a moment in time. It became a permanent mark on her identity. Every interview, every headline, every rumor brought the pain back. And yet, for decades, she held her silence. Until finally, she spoke. Betty breaks her silence. For years, Betty Ting Pei stayed quiet. She rarely gave interviews, avoided public events, and lived under the weight of a legend's final chapter. But silence has a way of growing heavy. On the 30th anniversary of Bruce Lee's death in 2003, she finally announced her intention to tell her side of the story. She began writing an autobiography. Over 7,000 words were completed, and offers poured in from publishers in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and beyond. But just as the project gained momentum, she stopped. The memories, the pain, and the involvement of others made it too difficult to continue. Still, over the years, pieces of her truth began to emerge. In 2013, 4 decades after Bruce's death, Betty confirmed what had long been suspected. They were lovers. But she denied any wrongdoing. On the day he died, she said, Bruce simply came over to rest. He complained of a headache. She gave him a pill. He never woke up. In 2015, she released a book titled The Best Time with Bruce Lee. It was less a tell-all and more a personal memoir, soft in tone, steeped in sorrow. "I hope people can be reasonable," she said. "This was no one's fault. It was heaven's will. But for the world, the questions remained." The lasting mystery. More than 50 years have passed since Bruce Lee died, yet the mystery refuses to fade. Each generation rediscovers the story, drawn in by the brilliance of his life and the cloud surrounding his death. Officially, he died of cerebral edema. Unofficially, the theories are endless. Some believe it was a tragic reaction to medication. Others insist it was heat stroke. A growing number now point to hyponatremia, excess water intake, possibly worsened by marijuana, and a strict liquid diet. But none of these theories feels complete. None offer closure. The absence of clarity has opened the door to darker ideas. Fans and conspiracy theorists alike have suggested Bruce was silenced, targeted by criminal groups, jealous rivals, or even mystical forces tied to martial arts lore. One theory even posited that his death was revenge for exposing ancient secrets. But the most enduring mystery may not be how he died. It may be why the truth was obscured. Raymond Chow's early deception, Betty's silence, and the shifting narratives all created an environment ripe for suspicion. And as time passed, the real story became harder to untangle from the legend. For Betty Ting Pei, the shadow never lifted. For Bruce's family, the pain remained raw. And for the world, the loss was monumental. Even now, with new medical opinions and historical context, there's no definitive answer. Only fragments, theories, and memories. The truth about Bruce Lee's death lies somewhere between medicine and myth, and perhaps that's exactly where legends are meant to rest. Bruce Lee was more than a martial artist. He was a visionary, a cultural bridge, and a force of nature. His untimely death in a quiet Hong Kong apartment remains one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. For Betty Ting Pei, that day changed everything. She wasn't just a witness to history. She became part of a legend cloaked in suspicion and sorrow. Decades later, the truth remains uncertain. But Bruce's legacy lives on, fueled by discipline, spirit, and global impact. What really happened that day? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more untold stories that history tried to bury.